This is a visual presentation of CueJam 1.0. We'll start on the home screen. You can see that there are options for login and for sign up. Logging in is not necessary. It only empowers Cloud Sync. There's the possibility of some explanation above these buttons that calls out that login and sign up are not necessary. Cloud Sync would include saved CueJams and your practice data. But as you can see, both saved CueJams and practice data are accessible without logging in. That's because they will be saved on your device by default. Find a CueJam is a button that, upon clicking it, would open a screen, which I have not created a design for yet. Might not create a design for it since it might be simple, but it would show a dialog for typing in a code for a CueJam or name, and that would bring up a list of CueJams which have been published by other people. Or if it's a code, it would bring up the exact CueJam. If you click on Start a CueJam, you will be opening a default, or you could consider it blank CueJam, which you can further customize. Let's go look at that screen. Here is exactly what I think that would look like when you open up a default blank CueJam and it's in its paused state. This one. Notice how there's a cues section in the middle of the screen. This is the centerpiece of the app. It's kind of what it's all about. You can see that it shows an example of what these cues would look like, and a section which is for configuring your cues. Notice how it says layer 1 here, and how you can add a layer to your cue. This means that if you were to continue customizing this cue, that could involve removing this default provided note names layer and replacing it with something else, or it could mean complementing it, as we can see in this example, with something like chord qualities or even a second layer of note names. Notice how this example looks. That's the cues section. Let's have a look. Well, first let me point out that when you have multiple layers, you can reorder them as well by dragging on the right. And also notice that if you've made changes to your cues, you can save them as versions. Or you can delete versions or navigate to previous versions. Below the cues section, there is a metronome control section. Clicking this button mutes the click or unmutes it. Clicking on this button brings up a tempo picker modal. Clicking on this button, or of course these two as well, allows you to quickly adjust the tempo on the fly. Start or stop the click, which also starts and stops the cues all together. As playback is underway, this section displays an updated beat, 1, 2, 3, 4 in this case, advancing at the speed defined here. If you tap on this button, it opens a beat per cue picker modal. I have to point out that either somewhere in this section or somewhere in the settings drawer, I'll have to provide an option to have these cues advance with a certain amount of time rather than a certain amount of beats. As you see here, it's beats, not time. And if time were selected as the value to control the amount of time each cue shows, then instead of seeing beats per minute here, you would see seconds or minutes or hours or whatever. And here you would see the amount of time that's elapsed. Let's look up at this section. You can see that the current CueJam shows information about it here, its name, the amount of practice that has been completed so far, and then this clickable button here, Add Notes. What shows in the Add Notes section will change depending on what type of CueJam this is, whether there are notes or not, and perhaps a few other things. What we'll show in the Stats section depends a little bit whether or not there has been a timer configured for this CueJam or not. The version you're seeing right now does not have a timer. If there was a timer, you'd have to see that 21 seconds out of some other amount has elapsed. So 21 seconds of 30 minutes or something similar. The timer can also be configured to be a cue count, so you would see in such a case that 5 cues out of, let's say, 100 have been completed. And here you can see that if other CueJams do exist before or after this one, you could swipe to view those instead, or tap on them if they're visible like this. Here's a look at what this same screen would look like if you've already clicked the play button and the click is advancing. You can see that this card has changed a bit. You no longer see the draggable handles right here. So that means you're not allowed to drag these to reorder during playback. There's also no delete button or edit button in these areas. But there is this icon right here, which is indicating to you that you can swipe either to the right or to the left. Doing so, swiping to the right on any one of these layers that you've configured, will apply something to the value that you swiped on. So let's say I swiped on this G flat. That's a member of the note names layer. If I swipe to the right, I'm promoting G flat. That means I want to see G flat more often. Otherwise, it would show 12th of the time, because there are 12 notes in the note names layer. If I were to swipe to the left, that would mean I want to see it less often. If it's currently showing a 12th of the time, then that means it wouldn't show at all now. It would be disabled at the moment. If you wanted to re-enable the G flat, you would have to press the pause button and then press this edit button in order to see the modal where you can edit those things more granularly. And these are examples of what the screen looks like with the simpler cues, the default values, just a single note names layer. You can see that things display a bit larger to fill up a little more of the available space. you can see that since no name has been chosen here, this unnamed value shows. But this little hint would show if it's in the pause state. Stats show here for this unnamed CueJam. So unnamed and unsaved. It won't be saved unless you give it a name here. Here's an example of the simplest CueJam possible, but where instead of being opened by a user tapping on that button we saw on the home page, it would be opened from a deep link, shared by someone else, a public shared CueJam. Let's say it's a very, very simple CueJam and you see only one layer. Well, you wouldn't have the option to add more layers here. You wouldn't have the option to edit these at all. You wouldn't have the option to edit the name or to add or edit notes. Of course, you see a plus button here if there are no other CueJams. Now you would have the ability to edit the tempo or timing. And the reason that that's available to change even on a CueJam that you do not own is that that's more personal to the practicing individual. Do I want to actually hear the click right now? How fast do I want to play this, etc. But this is saved with the CueJam. So this information here is part of what's shared in a CueJam. And this is not. It has a default value. And a user will set their own. Although I do think it would be smart for us to have a default BPM shared with the CueJam, a public CueJam, in that if a user hasn't set their own, that the default would apply, but if they have set their own, then the one they've set would apply. Now let's have a look at what will show in the settings drawer. Quite a bit. I have to say that something is missing here. As we've said before, a user needs to be able to determine whether they want a CueJam to advance by beats or by time. It might be something that you choose here. I don't know for sure. But the things that definitely show here are included in this design. Some of these items up here would only show for shared CueJams. Other ones would only show for private CueJams. This, for instance, is for shared CueJams. You can't pin your own, it's simply in your library. This would show for all CueJams. You'll always want to be able to save a copy of your CueJam. This, as I've said before, is something that removes the CueJam from your list, but it does not remove the stats. Or perhaps I haven't said this before. Sorry. So basically, deleting a CueJam does not actually delete every sign of this CueJam. The stats hang around, the practice stats. This will only show for users who have the option of sharing a public copy, and that would be users who have subscribed to the highest tier if there are multiple tiers. The idea is that eventually I'll create some kind of tutorial to teach users how to use this app. Advanced options section includes the following: how Cue values refresh. You can see that all layers on each Cue is set as the default. Then you can select one random layer per Cue, one layer per Cue on completion of set and following layer. And then there's this example that will always show, and it'll automatically be refreshing more quickly than you would normally see it refreshing in a real CueJam, so that a user who's configuring this can watch the values update. This C, for instance, if it's all layers on each Cue, this C maybe every second would be replaced with a new note name: C, F sharp, A, E, etc. And hopefully we'll make it so that those values gracefully are replaced with a kind of slide out, slide in animation. And you would see this replacing as well, and you'd see this replacing as well on this particular configuration. Yeah, and then there are these other two options. And then this advanced option, CueJam timer. This option, basically, it's all one thing: CueJam timer and on timer completion. This section here would not show if this section wasn't showing as well, or if it wasn't if it wasn't selected, if it wasn't activated. You'll notice that it can be set to none. So if the CueJam timer is set to none, then the on timer completion section would not show. This section here, this entire section, is likely to be a pay-gated feature, a subscriber-only feature. And you can see there are other screens here. The saved CueJam screens. It might have more elements on it than it does right now. There might be some app header with the logo and possibly with the home screen shortcut. Right now this design is just showing that each CueJam will show with its name. There will be a button to go straight to practicing, and there will be a button to go well, in reality, this is not true. There won't be a button for practicing and editing. There will be only one button that's for both. Get rid of some of these unneeded things. We have a unified editor and viewer screen now, so we just need a practice button on each. This will be redesigned. We're going to redesign this, but just so you can see, there is one color for CueJams which are created by the current user, and then another color for CueJams which have been downloaded after having been shared by someone else. There are going to be two stat screens. So let me address this one first, the CueJam stats screen. So these are stats for a specific CueJam. If you look over at this unified CueJam screen, which we've described in detail before, and you look at this little stats section, this just shows two basic things about the current CueJam. But if you tap on it, you're going to a stat screen for that CueJam. That's this one, CueJam stat screen. The data that shows here includes time spent, cues completed, and total sessions for this CueJam. you can filter by time span. Now, if the CueJams are shared, if the CueJam is a shared one, you can see the same, but all users of this CueJam together. Keep in mind that the current user is not able to use the current CueJam if it's a shared one. Anybody who wants to use a CueJam to practice needs to create their own personal copy of it in order to practice that. Unless, well, so, excuse me, that's a little bit unclear. If you share a CueJam, you can't practice a CueJam that you've shared. You need to create a copy of the CueJam you've shared because of this problem. Let's look at this screen, which is also not designed visually. The All Stats screen. This is something you would arrive at if you were to tap on the Stats button on the home screen. Let's have a look at that. Right here. All right. If you tap on that, you get to a screen that's very much like the CueJam Stats screen. In fact, it's likely to have lots of shared components, but it's different. There's going to be a tabbed view. This is the tab that's additional for user. So the first tab is this one. For the current user of the app, they can see their total time spent practicing, total cues completed, total session. They can filter by time span on that. But the second tab, so the one that does not exist on the CueJam stats screen, is this one. And that only shows if a user, the user of the app, has shared CueJams in the past, and those CueJams have gotten some people to practice them. If that's the case, they're going to see this additional tab, which shows this information, but for their shared CueJams in aggregate. All of the users of their CueJams, total time spent, total cues completed, and total sessions. I have not yet decided what the copy will be for that screen, or really how it'll be designed, and so we'll have to work that out. Finally, there's the subscribe screen. At the moment, I have a 3-tiered subscription offering, and these details are not true. I'm going to delete them. Well, maybe I'll just edit them because there's some truth to it. Possibly. I'm not sure if I'll allow users to save unlimited CueJams and practice stats. I'm kind of leaning towards that. But the alternative to pay gating unlimited CueJams is to pay gate advanced features about it, like set timers for your CueJams and automatically I'd say and turn them into routines. We need to adjust this. Why isn't it letting me grab it? Okay, well, you get the idea. So it would say something like unlimited practicing, free forever. Unlimited practicing in CueJams, free forever. Right, and then you could turn them into routines, and then this one would allow you to publish your own content, get share codes for social media, see stats on your own users. So that is CueJam visually. Notice I didn't cover these beats per cue, modal picker, time picker modal, or this tempo picker modal, keyboard viz editor, or notation editor, these might not actually be in CueJam 1, and these ones should be simple enough that we don't need designs for them.